No. Oh, it says it's recording now, Jamie. All right. Thanks for your patience, you guys. All right. Really quick, just to confirm, you all can see the PowerPoint presentation? Someone can just say yes or...
Yes.
Okay. Thank you. Okay. All right, so really quick, we're just going to go into the goals of the clerkship. And really, it's important, you know, these are kind of the 5 basic key components of the family medicine approach to healthcare. And it's important for you to realize that there's a biological, a psychological, and social aspects for all patients, that it's comprehension across like all ages and disciplines. There's continuity of care. And with respect to context of care, it's taking into consideration your communities, where you are, what you have to offer, and integrating and coordinating that care across all the health services available in your communities. Is there anything you can add? And these are kind of our objectives of the clerkship. We're going to go through each of these kind of in more entirety and in depth, but basically you're going to be experience or go through a lot of common problems, wellness and prevention. I think overall there's 54 common conditions that that you can potentially be exposed to. 42 are going to be required. Again, we'll go over that later. How to effectively apply patient-centered care skills during your rotation, and professionalism in how you act with your care of your patients, and how you act in your communities, and how you act with all the providers and the staff and everybody at your clinics. So really, you should all have gone to this website already. It's easily Googled, Family Medicine Clerkship. But we also have a shortened URL, uwfmc.org. And then you'll have to then, once you go to the uwfmc.org, click on the left menu on the Info for Student tab. And then you'll get to this website, and really you should bookmark this because this contains all of our important information, from our syllabus to the link to this presentation to the clerkship assignment tracker, and to all the documents that we're going to talk about today. And so if you haven't already, then be sure to review this website because usually the answer is here. And on that note, one thing that you're going to be going to a lot, another really important thing that you should probably link to, is that second one down or third one down on the assignment tracker, the clerkship assignment tracker. And that's where we're going to go next. Here, and this is just a screenshot of your assignment tracker. It has basically objectives 1 through 4, and then a timeline of kind of when you're supposed to complete things by, and every part or every requirement that you're supposed to complete in your family medicine clerkship. Objective 1 contains all of those, what I said before, 54 common conditions. And on that, we'll talk a little bit more about what that contains, but basically you can print this out and kind of mark when you've completed things, but we expect you to track these things online. If you decide to print and write them down, then you need to make sure you go online each week, update them, track your electronically. There are weekly assignments that you need to pay attention to. For Write, you can agree on your timeline with your Write site director and kind of fill it in appropriately based on the length of Write. But I would say even for Write students, you should update it as you go. And if you are able to see something in clinic, then go and update it on your tracker. It'll just keep it most up to date. All of your site directors have access, so they can actually go in and see this. And it depends on the site you're at, but some site directors really take advantage of this so they can see your progress and they know what things you may need to see in clinic or what they need to do as a reminder. And then the only time you actually have to print it out and show it to your site director is at your mid and end of clerkship review. And those are great times just to follow up so that they know where you're at. Well, the mid-clerkship review specifically, if there's anything that you need to see, then they're able to help you see that. Anything else? So under objective 1 is common conditions, and our common conditions are broken up into 4 categories, and that's acute, chronic, health maintenance, and pregnancy or labor and delivery. So there's, like I said, 54 common conditions that you're going to be potentially exposed to. In acute conditions, we have 18 categories listed there, and you're required to complete 14 of the 18, or C, 14 of the 18. Those include things like cough, fever, dizziness, urinary tract infection. And if you can't see all 14 of the 18, there's an opportunity, and on the tracker it lists which FM case, which we'll talk about FM cases a little bit later, but you can see in its place. So chronic care, chronic diseases includes things like COPD, anxiety, hypertension, diabetes. We have 13 possible things that you have to see, of which you have to see 10 of the 13. Adult and child health maintenance includes things like all kinds of wellness, like child
Preventive stuff.
Preventative, there's well-child exams, newborn screenings. For adults, there's a bunch of cancer screenings, breast, and things that you're required to see. I think for that, there's 14, and you're required to see 11 of those. Pregnancy and labor delivery, not all sites will have pregnancy and labor delivery. There's 9 conditions that you're supposed to see, 7 out of the 9 that you're required to see. If your site does not have pregnancy or labor and delivery that you're able to see, then you will be required to take see the FM case in its place. And we'll discuss those in more depth in a little bit. So I think something that is a little bit different to family medicine is the effective patient-centered care, or how we have you guys think of your patient-centered care. We use this form called the Patient-Centered Observation Form, the PCOF form. And we have this is also our mini CEX of the clerkship, but basically you'll see this linked as objective. I believe this is objective 2 in your assignment tracker. There's links from the assignment tracker that you can get. You can get this form from the tracker. And basically, I don't know, do you want to talk about this a little bit, expand on this a little bit more?
Sure. Yeah, so this is basically the effective patient-centered care curriculum, and the patient-centered observation form gives pretty specific behaviors that that demonstrate patient-centered care. So, and it breaks it down into really specific and discrete areas, like establishing rapport, or using the electronic health record well, or doing shared decision making. And you can use this form, and again, this is your mini clinical examination. So each clerkship has one of these, and this is ours. So you're expected to do this form a handful of times over the course of the clerkship. We hope that you'll get a chance to do the whole thing tip to tail at least once. But you can also use it to have your preceptor observe you doing specific skills. So say you're wanting to work on agenda setting, you can say, can you observe me doing agenda setting with this patient and give me feedback based on this form. There's also a series of videos that's associated with this. So, and you'll kind of get a training on how to use this form by watching the videos and using the form. And there's pretty clear instructions on how to do that on the website as well.
And I'll just add that you can also use this form to observe your faculty, so that you can kind of break down and learn from them and exactly how you want to integrate this in your care. So this is a little bit more about the FM cases. If any of you have already gone out on some of your peds or internal medicine, you may have already logged into this. We use MedU. And so there is a link on our website if you haven't yet done this for peds or internal medicine. So you'll want to do that just so you get your account set up. And we have 40 total cases, but that includes 5 CLIP, which is the pediatric cases, and 2 internal medicine simple cases. So there's 33 family medicine cases. This is a nationally used curriculum, and it includes self-assessment questions that are at the end of each of the cases, I believe, and some throughout. nationally used and nationally assessed and nationally updated. So it's been a very useful tool for us and as part of our formal curriculum. I think a lot of times we're asked why we use it, and I think with everybody out in the region all across WWAMI, it's the one way that we can really make an equitable experience for you all by having one kind of standard set of cases for you guys to refer to. And I can let Jean expand on this a little bit more, but I think it also helps to, in the way that they're presented, it helps with clinical reasoning. And
so the way that the cases are set up is that, and maybe some of you guys have already done this in pediatrics or internal medicine, but they basically walk you through a case, and so it gives you, kind of gives you the opportunity to think through the case, use some clinical reasoning as you go, learn as you go through the case, and it's it's sort of consistent with clinical encounters, and also sort of incorporates more than one thing. So it's, there's not a case that's just about ankle sprain. Like, it also has, some preventive medicine issues that come up, or maybe something about obesity, or other things that come in, which is very similar to the way that medicine actually works in the real world.
And each case comes with kind of a summary, or at the end they call it a summative form. It's in a PDF, so you can kind of like take out a lot of the important points of each of the cases. And on that note, we've been using the FM cases for a really long time, and we've been getting a lot of feedback on how to kind of make these easier, better for you guys. And help answer some of your questions before you ask them. The PDFs, we've been told that the PDFs are kind of inconsistent with the case content, and it's our understanding whatever's in the PDF is going to tries to collect all the important content. So there may not be some inconsistencies, but the important items are in the summary at the end in the PDF. We've been told that the cases are redundant, but what we found is that redundancy is kind of intentional, and it's meant to help you master the content. And I think and then we were also told that, I guess, it was kind of hard to discover like what cases had what content. So I'm going to go through it really quickly, but this is one of the documents we asked you to download, was to be a content list. And so basically, I'll show you briefly, but it's our attempt to kind of tell you what's in each of the cases so you can use it as a reference. So one moment. So this is the FM cases. I believe it's called the FM Simple Clip Content List. And as you can see exactly what is in the case. So if you were potentially like just do a control find, and if you're reviewing the schedules for tomorrow, for instance, you notice that you're going to be doing a well care exam, then you can search for that and potentially like study up ahead of time. If there's anything else.
Yeah, I mean, I think this is a nice way to either solidify information or learning that you had during the day, or to sort of prepare for the next day. So I think it's always a nice idea to kind of preview the schedule for the upcoming day. And, like Jamie said, if you saw something that you're a patient that you're interested in being, you could do the case and prepare for that patient. Or the flip side is, if there's somebody that kind of interested you today, it makes sense to do, to try and figure out which cases corresponded with that case. What did you say about how many they should tend to do?
So just to go back really quick about some more feedback, we also want to make sure that we keep this really current. So it is tested annually, but if for any reason we work very closely with maybe this current, if you notice a bad link or something not working correctly, to let us know, and we can work quickly to make sure that that's fixed. So again, just helping us make sure everything's operating smoothly. Please let us know. So we've kind of touched on this briefly on looking or using FM case as well, but you can use them to help you in your clinic, as we just mentioned. And then this is where there's 40 cases, and the cases, while they're not technically required for you to do, They are the basis of the MedU exam. So the exam, the final exam, which we'll talk about more later, is taken through MedU. And so it's only in your benefit to complete all the cases because the exam is based on the cases. So if we kind of, with a 6-week clerkship, if you do at least one case per day, planning on about 45 minutes per case. Oh, I'm getting a request if everyone can make sure their microphones are muted. I think there's some feedback that people can't hear. So if you can just mute your phones or mute your microphone, or mute your microphones on your computer, that'd be great. Thank you. So, oops. So on the average, it takes about 45 minutes to complete one case. So if you were to do one every day, then that would give you some time to still study for the exam. And the content that's linked internally within the case isn't required, but they are useful if you want to do that. I don't know, is there anything else you want to add? Okay. So far, I want to stop and see if anybody has any questions. Okay. All right, so I think one of our objectives is professionalism. So it's your responsibility, if you go in the assignment tracker, one of the first items under the professionalism objective is a link, and you can download the form so you know what the expectations are for you. Also, within the evaluation, the feedback and evaluation form, it's called feedback and evaluation form, and in brackets, grade anchors on our website. There's one of the items you're being evaluated on is professionalism. And so you'll have 2 chances to discuss this with your site director, and that's at your mid-clerkship review and then again at the end of clerkship review. And so it's important that you discuss this also with your site director so that you know where you stand, both for your evaluation and in general. And then another thing that we do is we send out professionalism awards, and I'm gonna let Jean talk about this because you've seen more of the awards in the professionalism scores than I have.
Yeah, I mean, so basically there's a student professionalism award and a staff and faculty professionalism award, and it's an opportunity for people to be recognized for exceptionally good behavior, kind of, as opposed to the opposite where that sometimes people have bad things pointed out. So, and I think people nominate, so you guys are welcome, and we would encourage you as you see people do amazing things to nominate the faculty and staff that you work with, and things that people have been nominated for in the past, or sort of one situation that sticks out to me is a faculty who had a really, really challenging situation on the inpatient side and was with the family and a patient, and was able to sort of negotiate and manage challenging family and a palliative care situation in a really sort of beautiful way with a beautiful outcome is one example. Or somebody who just consistently took time to agenda set with patients and get the patient's needs met in a super sort of efficient and appropriate way while also making time to teach. So maybe that's kind of a superhuman award, but it happens, and we have had a great chance to recognize people like that. So and students are recognized as well. And again, sometimes it's just the students who kind of go above and beyond and kind of contribute to teaching patients or teaching, one student that was recognized recently was, had apparently like really an exceptionally calm demeanor and was great with patients in a lot of ways, but then also kind of went above and beyond. And there was some sort of public health issue in the community, and sort of took the time to do a special presentation to faculty and staff about sort of why this is important and what to look for. So it's, and we give the awards out, for the students, we give the awards out in time for it to make it onto your ARIS application for residency as well. So it's something that benefits, certainly benefits you if you're nominated and win, and or when. And, I think that it really is a great, it's a great recognition for our faculty when they're recognized in this way as well.
And you'll get a link the last week of the rotation. So if that's something, if you want to submit a nomination for somebody, then that's the time. And for Wright, it'll be the last week of your Wright experience. So the duty hours, you guys, this is in the UW School of Medicine handbook, and they need to be followed as listed in that policy book. If for any reason there are issues, this is something you can bring to your site director, or you can, of course, contact us and let us know. And that's really the most important part about this, is just to let us know if there's anything that you have concerns about. So here, I'll actually let you start this one.
Sure. So we just, we spend all this time talking about professionalism. I think it's important to recognize that, both learners and teachers have rights and responsibilities. Your teachers are expected to treat you fairly and respectfully and without bias. And also to give you timely, constructive, and accurate feedback. So, this is part of the reason that we really want you guys to get a formal mid-clerkship feedback, because it gives you time to improve and to build on the skills that you've already built. So, so that's them. And then for you guys, being courteous and respectful of others. I think one of the things that's a big transition as you move into the clinical years is that, I think that oftentimes, especially in your preclinical time, you're accustomed to kind of putting your own learning needs first. But, really once you're in the clinical setting, you have to put the patient's welfare first. So kind of monitoring your expectations based on what's going on in the patient care setting, knowing your own limitations and asking for help, maintaining patient confidentiality. And then I think this other one about feedback is kind of huge. Recognizing that feedback is an opportunity for you to improve your knowledge and skills. So, people don't give you feedback because they want to break you down. They give you feedback because they want you to be a great colleague in the future. And students or your teachers are volunteering their time to have a student because they're trying to make sure that the doctors that will be practicing next to them and taking care of them and their families in the future are great doctors. And so trying to receive feedback in the spirit of improvement and in the spirit of collegiality, I think is really important.
I just add, maintaining patient confidentiality. You've all taken HIPAA and done that, but it is important to remember that in and out of the clinic, and it's important in some of the smaller sites. With all the right students on right now, I thought it was important. Just that extends, of course, as you all know, past the clinic, but into the communities, and just being respectful of that in every way. So again, we'll go to this. This is the recipe for family medicine clerkship success, and it's another download from the website. And I'll open it up here in a second, and Dr. Kozlukis is going to go through it briefly with you. But it's a helpful document to just print out and kind of refer to as you go through the clerkship. We're not going to go into a lot of depth here in it.
So I'll be pretty brief about this. I mean, I think that the best thing to do is to try and be engaged, and whether that's making sure that you're on time and have sort of previewed your patients when you have a chance to, when you hear something that you don't know about, or when a question comes up, offering to look it up and then coming back and sharing that information with your team or your attending. I think asking for feedback, and again, sort of trying to receive any feedback that you get in the spirit of improvement is really important. Be good to everybody on the team, and that includes people who aren't just doctors. I think that sometimes people take for granted the good nature of particularly support staff. So nothing would work without the support staff. So make sure you're really nice to them. and try to be adaptable. So there's a little more to this, but I guess actually, one other thing I would say is finding a mentor is really important. And I think particularly for you guys who are kind of out in a place where you don't necessarily know very many other people, make sure that you take a minute to identify who your people are. So, you certainly have friends and family at home or maybe locally for you right now, which is great. You certainly have your college mentors. Your site director often is going to be somebody that if you have concerns, you can go to. But if you feel like you can't do that, please don't hesitate to reach out to somebody at the School of Medicine, like your college mentor, like us. And we certainly don't want you to suffer in silence if there's something that's not going well. And I think the other thing, actually, just specifically with family medicine, is that there's a little bit of everything in family medicine, which is pretty fun. And so no matter what it is that you want to ultimately pursue as your career, there's something for you here. And so, I know that sometimes people feel like, well, there's nothing, like I don't need to do another sort of primary care thing, or I don't need to do another whatever. And but I think that there's something for you here. And so putting yourself out there and finding what that is will be very helpful for you.
And there is a don't list at the bottom, but I would, it's just to helpful reminders and not to be tardy and as much as possible, or to explain it if there's something that you weren't able to avoid. Okay. Moving on. Again, in the spirit of professionalism and also in the spirit of giving feedback, you also are going to be giving us some feedback at the end of your clerkship, and you're required to do a end of clerkship evaluation. And I'll let Jean expand on it. This actually doesn't go directly to us right now, but the way we handle it is the same. This actually goes to the Dean of Curriculum first, and then only unless there's imminent danger do we notify the site. But I'll let Jean expand.
Yeah, so basically with anything having to do with your feedback to the sites, we do whatever we can to protect your confidentiality. And so, even for the regular feedback that's like, how many well child checks did you do? Like that stuff gets bunched, and depending on how many students per year the site gets, they get it once or twice a year, and long after you're gone, so that they can take it with, so it's sort of collated summative data. In terms of the concerning comments and low scores, on your evalu at the end of your clerkship, there is a time for you to say, I think it is a confidential comment. So is there any comment that you want to say that's confidential and won't be shared, with your site? And also if you score anything a 2 or a 1 for anything, then that kind of goes in that same pile. So with the confidential comments, first of all, if there's something that's not confidential, don't put anything there, because it just ends up going, it kind of gets alarmed. So it turns into like a little like, oh God, there's something going on. And then it's, half the time they're like, Dr. Smith is awesome. So that's not the place for it. So unless there's imminent danger, we don't notify the site until we can sort of completely assure your anonymity. So we wait until the grades are in, we wait until the time for a grade appeal is passed, and then we kind of go and mention it. And often we sort of still shroud it in a little bit more secrecy in terms of what the nature of the complaint is. That said, because we want to protect you and we don't want you to feel like you're, at risk by sharing this information. That said, there is a place and there's a little checkbox that says, may we contact you to find out more about this situation. And I would highly encourage you to allow us to contact you. And here's why. One is sometimes we need to collect a little bit more information so we can figure out what to do and what the appropriate next steps are. But the other thing is that sometimes people put these comments out there and it just goes into, they feel like it just goes into a vacuum and they have no idea whatever happened. And that's unsettling as well, because, you know, sometimes you feel like you had a bad experience and you want to know that something came of this thing that you stuck your neck out to share with us. And we make a point of closing the loop with you guys. And we can't necessarily say, you know, this is the exact specific action that happened, but at least we can say, hey, thank you so much for letting us know that that you guys brought these concerns to us, and we want you to know that an appropriate corrective action has been made. And I think that, you know, just knowing that the loop is closed for yourself can be really reassuring. So both from the standpoint of making sure that we have enough information to do what needs to get done, and also you get some information about what happened on the other side, I think is really useful. So please do check the box that says that we can contact you if you have a concern. Would you add anything else to that?
No, I wouldn't. I would just say if anybody has any questions about those or anything else.
And you can also always reach out to us, right? I mean, if something comes up and it's 6 months later, like, I don't know that we can change a grade. We can't do a lot of different things, but what we can do is we can listen to you and make sure that your concerns are at least, you know, heard and addressed to whatever extent we can.
So I'll briefly go through the required activities. Again, this is a slightly different timeline for the right students, but all appropriate questions for you to discuss with your site director. And some of these important dates are on your right calendar, so they've already been kind of distributed through your right experience. But all the requirements are still required. So you will all participate in some kind of site orientation. You've either already done it or you will do it very soon. And so attendance is a general requirement, not just for week 1, that's just your attendance in general. All students are allowed 2 excused absences, and that can be illness or something planned. If you are going away for a wedding, for instance, you need to discuss that with your site director. Anything after 2 days would need to be made up, and if there's any issue where you can't make it up, then please get in touch with us and we can just discuss with you an alternative plan. On that note, if you haven't used all of your absent days, then we understand a lot of you have a long distance to travel between this clerkship and your next, and so intentionally the exam is on a Thursday of the last week of your clerkship, so that Friday can be used as a travel day if you still have an available day off, basically. So
I think if you think you're going to need a travel day, I would recommend that you have that conversation this week with your site director, so that you can kind of block that off. And then if you get into a place where you had to miss, 2 days because you got the flu or something, then you can still make that up and have the travel time. But I try to get it on the calendar now, just so that it's, hopefully set.
And that way you can also make sure you plan your end of clerkship review, which is another requirement that we'll talk about. But if your preceptor knows that you need Friday as a travel day, then you'll probably have your end of clerkship review on Thursday after the final exam. So, all right. So, and then of course this orientation webinar, which you are now attending. I'll talk about the clinical reasoning is a practice exam, access through Catalyst. I'll talk about that on an upcoming slide. Around week 3 or in the middle of your clerkship, you'll sit down and meet with your clerkship site director. It's at this time that you'll print out an actual copy of your assignment tracker and go through it with them, and you'll also go through the feedback and evaluation form and the grade anchors form and discuss anything else to help you on your clerkship to improve. And week 6, or the last week of your clerkship, for right students, this is May 4th, but final exam is at 9:30 to 12:30 on the last Thursday of week 6. And then you need to do that week the end of clerkship review. And then after that, you'll need to do your site and your faculty evaluations. And as a reminder, throughout the clerkship, you want to try to do that mini CEX, the patient-centered observation form, as many as 4 to 6 times, either in its entirety or bit by bit, focusing on parts of that form. So to expand on the clinical reasoning practice test, this link I will send out to you via email, but it is also in this orientation webinar. It's in the syllabus. But you have a couple weeks to complete this. Right students, you have a little bit longer. It's 14 questions based on each of those cases, 2, 4, 6, 20, or 21. So basically, if you do each of those cases and then take this test, you'll probably do very well. And the point of this is kind of to help you. We know that, like, well, I'll go into that in a minute, but it's to give you some experience in test taking, basically, during your clerkship. And if you have any questions on any of these questions, then on the third week, so that's why we tell you to do it in week 2, we have a voluntary conference call set up with either Dr. Kozlukis or Dr. Keene, the other clerkship co-director, and they're basically on standby from 12 to 1 Pacific time of that week. So Wright students, they're already on your Wright calendar. You'll have multiple times, maybe I think it's 3 times, where you could potentially call in to ask questions about this practice test. And so, I don't know. And then, is there anything else? So the voluntary conference call is not required, but you must complete this Catalyst quiz, basically. And the reason why we have it is with residency programs continuously using USMLE scores, and there's just more emphasis on, and the scores are constantly going up at each year. We want to make sure that even during your clinical years, we have you practicing good test taking skills, basically. And you do that with your exams, but we also want to make sure it's in just the curriculum as well. Does anybody have any questions about that? Okay. Your final exam is, again, Thursday of week 6 from 9:30 to 12:30 Pacific time. It is online, taken at your site, or if anybody is nearby Seattle and their site does not have the capability to take it, you can arrange to have it with me here in Health Sciences. And basically you just do that by email saying you want to take it here, and then I set that up. But I need to know who's going to be here ahead of time. So, but yeah, most students take this at site. It's online, it's closed book. Someone should be watching you or hanging out nearby. It's 100 questions. 10 questions are test questions and are not scored. They're basically meant to help with future exams. So 90 questions are actually scored, but they're mixed in, so there's no way to tell about those extra 10 questions. It's based exclusively on the FM, CLIP, and simple cases. The Wright students will take the exam on May 4th, which is a Thursday. It's actually with our spring A cohort, I believe, from 9:30 to 12:30 Pacific time. So Wright students, you're on May 4th, and you'll get reminders. It's also on your Wright calendar. But for the traditional clerkship students that are listening in, I don't know the actual date, but it's 6 weeks from Thursday.
Yeah,
I will send it out. I
haven't changed the calendar yet.
Sorry. I will send you out a reminder. So just in general, we want to make sure you all kind of are really clear about the evaluation process. And this is pretty much the same for Wright or any students, but slightly different, I guess a little bit, but at the Wright sites, but mostly the same.
It's probably about the same.
I think it's the same. Basically, it works a little differently at a site where you maybe have, or you work closely with 1 or 2 docs. If you're at a small site where you only have a couple educators there, then you know directly who's giving you feedback for your evaluations. But at sites where you may be working at a residency and you have a lot of educators all throughout the clerkship, different sites do it different ways. Some will use feedback cards, but basically it's the job of the site director to collect feedback from all of the preceptors, and they will enter this into a grade form for you. And it's important to note that as they incorporate this feedback, they're weighing it slightly different based on someone that worked with you. If you are at a site that has multiple educators, then they'll weigh it different on someone that worked a half day with you that you maybe had a bad experience with at the very beginning of your clerkship versus someone that you worked with a half day at the end of your clerkship. I guess they're going to compile all of your feedback based on how you're doing overall, weighing slightly more like how much you've improved towards the end.
Well, and I think also, they're going to take the idea is that the site director also will look at how frequently you worked with somebody. So if there's somebody that you worked with a bunch over the course of the whole 6 weeks, as opposed to somebody that you worked with 1 or 2 half days over the whole course of the time, 1 or 2 half days should not make or break your grade. And then they do ideally weigh the second half of the clerkship a little bit more heavily than the first half of the clerkship, because ideally this is a mastery clerkship, and the idea is that you are going to be improving and growing your skills all the way through the course of the clerkship. So the second half should be a more sort of useful piece of feedback time. The other thing I'd say, though, is that I guess there's two things. One is this process should be clear to you. So if you have questions about how this is done at your site, you should bring them to your site director, and this should be transparent, and you should be able to sort of have this conversation in an open way. The other thing is that if there is some part of the process that has you involved, such as the site director gives you a stack of feedback cards for you to give to whoever you work with on a individual half day or full day basis, the onus is on you to take those cards and take it seriously and get the feedback. Because if they only have one or two feedback cards, then that's what they have to, that's the sort of evidence or the data that they have to compile your grade at the end. So please do. I know sometimes people feel a little weird asking for this kind of stuff, but don't, because we're all really used to it. The sites that have learners at them, and which you are at currently, and it's this is part of you taking your professional development seriously.
And not all sites use the feedback cards, so just making sure you have this early discussion, whether it's at your site orientation or not, that you have this early conversation with your site director about how they go about doing their evaluations, so you know how you can be helpful, so that they have the most information on you. And then final grades are actually, so the site director will compile and submit to us, us being the clerkship team here in Seattle, and we will then submit your final exam or your final evaluation, and you will receive that in eValue. What we do here is we incorporate the exam score, and just basically, and then we'll go into what the evaluation will look like in some future slides. So overall, you're graded on 11 scoring categories. These are the 11 categories. These are all on your feedback and evaluation grade anchors form. And you'll go through this at your mid-clerkship review and your end-of-clerkship review. But these are each of the scoring categories. Your final exam is based on an average of these and the final exam. The next slide kind of explains, this is a screenshot of the feedback and evaluation form. So one of the categories is knowledge and subject area. You're graded on a 1 to 5, and basically an average of all 11 of the scoring categories, you'll get your GPA. And that breakdown is included on our grading criteria form. I'm going to go back to this really quick and just expand. When you go over this feedback and evaluation form with your site director, this is where you can talk about where you stand at your mid-clerkship review and how you can work towards getting a 5, work towards gaining mastery. Is there anything else? So the grading criteria form, I think I asked you to download. That's mainly just so you have it on hand, but here's a screenshot of kind of the important information on that grading criteria form. The top has the 11 scoring categories. The primary difference between this year and last year on our grading criteria is that now you'll see a breakdown of your grade. So when we submit our final grade to you, we being the clerkship team here in Seattle, you'll see a clinical grade, your exam grade, and then a final grade. And so your clinical grade is an average of the 11 scoring categories given to you by your site preceptor or your site director. So whatever average they give you, this just basically means that it's entirely possible for you to get a clinical honors. Potentially, if you pass your final exam, then you get a high pass as a final grade. So it's important to note that the final exam does have an impact, and if you do get a pass on the exam, it can impact from honors to a high pass as a final grade. Is there more? The final exam scores are broken down based off averages from the national, from MedU. How do you say it? Cutoffs based on national means from the MedU exams. That's all I.
Yeah, so the MedU exam, which is the exam that you guys will take too, is given at 50-something medical schools across the country. And, there's normative data based on those exams. So the cutoffs for honors, high pass, pass, and fail are based on on that normative data about where how students across the country are scoring.
And so for the final exam, So for the final exam, it basically works. You'll get an honors, a high pass, or a pass, and then based on that percent, it'll be a grade adjustment to your clinical GPA. So if you had potentially a high pass, right on the cusp of for your clinical, so what is it, 4.9, or if you had a 4.8 as a clinical grade and you got a honors on your exam, it would be a grade adjustment of 0.1, so you would have a final grade of honors. We have a question. You want to tackle that?
So I'm not really familiar with what the question is. Most clerkships have an honors score of 4.5 to 5. Why is family medicine 4.9 to 5? So is that for the final grade? Because I actually don't know what the other clerkship criteria are. I mean, ours is basically based on, so the exam scores are based on normative data. So, we want, based on sort of what percentage of people we, okay, so it's the final grade. So yeah, so normative data for the exam. In terms of the final grade, I think it has to do with, it's been recommended that we have sort of a certain percentage of students that make honors, high pass, pass, and fail. Obviously, an incredibly low percentage of students fail. And in order to meet those, that number of that percentage of students that gets honors, that's the cutoff that we have. I think our exam score adjustment is, or like the percent that the exam can sort of adjust your final grade up or down, is significantly lower than in other clerkships. Although, the truth of the matter is I don't really know how other clerkships make the determination. Jamie, I don't know if you have anything else to add.
I would just say I don't know if it's, it might be harder to get that 4.6 or 4.7 in other clerkships, and for us it's easier to get a 4.8, 4. So I don't know. I don't know what their data is based off for other clerkship versus ours. We just know that what our results are, and I don't feel like we recently had a discussion about this, but
I know that other clerkships definitely weigh their exams heavier than we do as well. So
we put a little bit less weight on our exam. But it is not possible if you do pass the exam to get honors, and that's partially because of the grade adjustment. So if for any instance, and this again also very rare, you do fail the exam, then you'll have to enroll in an online remediation course, restudy, and then retake. And you'll need to do that by the end of your third year. So this is an available checklist. I didn't download it because it's available to you if you have questions about EHR at your site. But it is a good resource just to kind of print out or to look at on where to go for medications or, history or things like that. So it could be a helpful resource if you want to just look at it. And then I don't know if you want to say something about prudency and copy paste.
Oh, yeah. I think one of the things that we kind of have run into a fair amount, and I think that there's some variability of how this is handled in different places. But, I think being real careful about how you use copy and paste. So, each note for each patient on each day needs to be sort of specific for that day. And, I think that certainly not copying and pasting the information from an attending's note or from another person's note is really important. I think that sometimes, people, when they see a patient multiple times, they'll kind of copy and paste and then and then update the various problems. And, there's different ways to do this, but I would just encourage you to be really careful with the use of copy and paste, and make sure that your work is your own.
Okay. And on that note, does anybody have any follow-up questions or any questions about what we've talked about today?
I had a question. I might have missed it because my Zoom wasn't working for a while. The professional or patient-centered
well, I'm just going to
form.
say thank you all for attending and your questions. And if you have any questions, we're very available throughout the entire time of the clerkship. So you can always reach out to me if you have any issues with anything, please do. So, all right. Thank you all.
Have fun, you guys. Okay.
So, stop the recording.
We're good.